So, hello and welcome back to Edie's Mission Possible Sofa. You're probably a bit unaware of actually what this is. This is essentially where we grab a few of the speakers and have a kind of light-hearted chat around some of the key themes about sustainability. Because, you know, environmentalism can be quite heavy-hitting. It's nice to have an informal conversation about it, which is exactly why Lucy's here for that exact reason. So, joining me today, we do have Lucy Siegle, renowned environmental and ethical living journalist and broadcaster, of course, and also Fiona Ball, who is head of inspirational business at Sky. Fiona, I want to start with you because I was actually sitting in on the session that you did this morning. It was called the Big Plastics Debate Part 1, and judging by how busy it was, there was literally people swarming around the outside. They couldn't actually fit in. Clearly, it's still the big debate to be had. I wanted to get your, I suppose, a brief kind of summary of that session and where we kind of are in terms of that big plastics debate in the UK.
Yeah, so I think we're going well. We're at a tipping point. The awareness is really up. I mean, with Sky Ocean Rescue campaign, we've reached over 40 million people, and they are aware and they're wanting to take action. I think we've now got to change that awareness into actual action, and that's action by business, like ourselves, really making strong commitments around particularly the single-use plastic and the plastic we can just get rid of. That we've just becoming used to, covering everything in plastic when we're looking at packaging. But also there needs to be much more action also, which is coming through from government and legislation. So there's a fair living playing field for everybody, but that takes time. So that's why I think businesses really need to step up, because we can act and we can innovate really, really quickly. I think where we got to the end of the day was, it's great to see the awareness really going. We're at the tipping point. We really need to turn that in kind of awareness into action now by everybody.
And Lucy, you were in on the keynote theatre in a session titled Britain's Green Future. How green is it looking at the moment based on that session?
Oh, it was a very mixed picture. Yeah. So I had to go into the complexity of the debate that we just had. There was a lot of positivity, actually. So there's a guy, David Simmons from WSP. Yeah, unbelievable energy and enthusiasm, who set up this programme within his organisation that's just gone, global like the organisation. And I really admire that spirit and that enthusiasm. And when you see people like that who are working within organisations, well, like you've done with plastic, you just think, well, how can we fail? We know what the criteria is. I think the Climate Change Committee landmark advice that came out has given everybody some very difficult goals to get to, and it's a difficult discussion to have. But sometimes when you light the fire under people, it's the thing that does it. We know what we need to do. We have a lot of data. We have massive architecture in the form of the Paris Agreement, 17 global goals. We have this globally agreed architecture. We just got to get the job done.
And you mentioned the B word. Did that bring down the conversation at all?
Care about it, mate.
Good, that's what we want.
Well, and in a way, and I did make this point, if we look at the scientific evidence that came out last year, and we look at things like the Hothouse Earth Report, which I know wasn't its real name, 270,000 downloads, which is unusual for an academic report, all press coverage across the world, that's talking about our move as a species from the Holocene to the Anthropocene. 10,000 years we've had conditions of the planet. We've now become such a force in our own right as humans that we have shifted into a different geological epoch. That's what I call a hard Brexit. And nobody's mentioning it.
Yeah, it's been just a massive distraction in terms of central government and the policy and legislative frameworks they can roll out. But it's not to say they haven't just stood still. We have had the 25-year environmental plan, the Green Growth Strategy, more aspirational so than targets. But it seems the emphasis is falling on business and the private sector to go ahead of that curve, as we're seeing with the plastics debate, for example. And Fiona, you mentioned in your session the kind of biggest opportunity that a business had was to engage with others, whether that's suppliers, whether that's consumers. So whether this is plastics or not, how can business act as a real force for good and mobilise action, not just within their own four walls, but across value chains and across their consumer bases?
Yeah, well, no one business can do any kind of big commitment, whether it's climate change or plastics or resource efficiency, on their own. They have to work. I mean, we've got 7,000 suppliers, worldwide. And it's them we're working with to look at innovation and design of our products and our packaging, to make and reach the commitments that we're making. But also from the inspiring others kind of piece, some of our partners that we've got through our sports channels and our news channels, like the Premier League or the Oval Cricket, they're massive partners that we can really kind of reach different audiences through as well. The opportunity we can. To give one example, we work with Commercial Group, who are stationery suppliers, and we made one small change, in our business with them, but they did the same to all of their customers, which magnified the kind of reduction on the kind of plastic we were working with them on by just the kind of the ripple effect that you can have is incredible.
Lucy, you're obviously quite well versed in this subject as well. I see you on social media quite a lot, calling out corporates where they need to be. I think Boots was the most recent one in terms of how their plastic bag approach. You've got a new book coming out in July on the plastics aspect as well. So, how from a journalist point of view, where do you view the plastics debate? Where are we, perhaps from last year where Blue Planet launched? Is it still just awareness, or are consumers now making educated actions, or is it still on the feet of the corporates to essentially make sure they can't make the wrong choices?
Well, we're still debating, and we've still got lots of strategies that are trapped in a sort of seemingly endless cycle of consultation. And you mentioned the B word before, so that has sometimes been a help and sometimes been a hindrance. So at one point we had sort of senior figures vying to get the limelight and maybe distract from Brexit, so that everyone was talking about plastic. Do you remember a few months ago? It was kind of insane. Like the Prime Minister was talking about it, Gove was talking. Everyone was trying to maneuver each other on plastic. But when you're not in the eye of the storm, that's when it gets difficult, because that is when you've got to get this policy shift through. And we have a deposit return scheme stuck in consultation. The waste strategy, obviously, we need to harmonise recycling systems. That's something that our viewers at my show keep asking about, because they're just confused by their recycling. And that is very difficult for local authorities, because things that are stuck in consultation cycles, obviously when they come up to renewal and they've got a 5 or 7 year partnership to form, they don't know what's going to be going on. So we're losing opportunities for every day this stuff is stuck in consultation. And the truth of the matter is, globally, we have not decreased our single-use plastic and plastic manufacture since Blue Planet 2. It goes up every year, and some of that is forces that we can't control as consumers. So we didn't know about the shale gas boom in the US. This is a fossil fuel story. This is a climate change story. The shale gas boom in the US has resulted in more manufacturing plants for plastic packaging being opened. The automotive industry has shifted onto EVs, so less fossil fuels going there. So they're looking for somewhere to dump this cheap fossil fuel plastics. This is why, as citizens, not consumers, as citizens, we need to rise and resist, or it comes our way. And this is the whole point of the plastic debate. We've seen some brilliant awakening amongst citizens who are also consumers, but it's not being matched by retailers or brands at the moment, because still too much stuff, just on a day-to-day shop, stuff is still wrapped in plastic needlessly. And if somebody doesn't ban the shrink-wrapped coconut very soon, I am going to implode or explode, I don't know which. Since 2005, I have been at war with the shrink-wrapped coconut. Why would you shrink-wrap a coconut?
We've got a natural packaging already,
Yeah.
Fiona, would you agree with the tone of that as well?
No, I agree. I think for consumers at the moment it's very difficult for them to, we're not encouraging them, we're not helping them reduce their single-use plastic, and that's got to change. While seeing it coming through with innovators and new shops that are opening that are single-use plastic free, I've got 2 luckily. Where I am Greenwise in kind of Fetcham and Ashton, which is great, because there's actually a shop you can go there and they make it easier for you. Because day to day, I think if you're shopping, everything is wrapped in plastic when you're doing a shop. I think the businesses and the retailers, we really do need to get a move on.
Step up, don't they? They
Yeah,
step
yeah.
up. But I don't know if you get this, but I can hear now, before I walk into a room, I hear a lot of rustling, and that's because people are hiding plastic from me. And I know what they're doing. But the thing is, you can, as a householder, as a teacher, parent, kids do this all the time, you can make a really big dent in your own consumption of plastic very quickly. That's what my book, Turning the Tide on Plastic, is all about, the strategies. However, if people halve their plastic, they feel great for a bit, but they are more ambitious often than the policymakers and the brands and the retailers. And we can't have that. That's not sustainable for very long, because that's when people lose interest. If it's made too difficult for them to go that final quarter of reducing their plastic.
Something you touched on a bit earlier I thought was really interesting was the fact that you kind of linked the plastic packaging issue to the climate change issue, which I think a lot of sustainability professionals that I've spoken to in my job role have struggled to do or wanted insight on how to kind of take that engagement around plastic, which is this visceral, visual problem, with something that's a bit more of a concept around climate change. And we're in this really interesting era right now where we have politicians declaring climate emergencies, we have the CCC advice, we have this understanding and this well, at least national understanding of the need to get to net zero emissions. But how can a sustainability professional or a business use the engagement they've had around plastics and perhaps start to push that to other areas of the sustainability agenda, whether that's climate change, whether that's more understanding around the circular economy, whether it's water stewardship? How do you see that conversation evolving?
Well, I think from a business perspective, anything that you're looking at, whether it's through the lens of plastics or whether it's climate change or energy efficiency, it's taking a life cycle approach of what products you put out on the market and really understanding the environmental effect that that's happening. So any work that we are doing around plastics, it's around innovation design and the circular economy approach. You're kind of reducing the kind of overall impact, and there where you can't, looking at kind of the reuse, the take back and the reuse of those products. So I think it's taking the same approach to whatever environmental issue you're looking at, whether it's climate change and the amount of energy and the energy efficiency you need to build into your products, or whether it's the resources that you use, whether that is timber, paper, whether that's plastics, and really taking a proper life cycle approach to everything that you're putting out onto the market.
Can citizens, you mentioned it's good when it's the eye of the storm around plastics and you can mobilise all this action. Do the general public have enough understanding to perhaps take both the climate battle and the plastic battle, even though they are interlinked, and act on them at the same time? Or am I being a bit cynical if I were to say that perhaps it's better just focusing on one issue at a time?
I think for me it's about going, I want to just mention a couple of other massive trends which have led already to some cultural or societal shift in thinking, and that's Extinction Rebellion and the rebellion of 10 days in central London, and the school climate strikes, Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
If you take those as a seismic moment, what they're talking about are first principles of what is happening right now, of a climate emergency, of the fact that we need to decarbonise, of the fact that green growth is not the solution. And it's those first principles that become the real drivers and the real motivators. So whether we talk about plastics or climate change, why don't we just talk about the first principles? And why don't we talk about the truth, which is what Extinction Rebellion is saying? We need to talk about the truth of this, which has often been camouflaged. For me, where we're looking at low-grade plastics, dreaming up new ways to recycle them and make them circular is beside the issue. There's still going to leave a fossil fuel impact. It's actually really, really hard to collect low-grade single-use plastics anyway. We need to not producing them in the first place, because that's if this was a climate emergency, which it is, that is the action that we would take. So I think getting tangled up in lots of smoke and mirrors and lots of extra marketing and lots of complex structures, obviously if it's right and appropriate and the science stacks up, fine. But I think we need a massive reassessment. I work a lot in the fashion industry, for example, and there's a lot of nonsense being talked about LCAs of polyester, for example, that is better for the environment overall, because people haven't factored in microplastics. So we need a reassessment of a lot of life cycle analysis with materials anyway, And on top of that, we need to be really direct. And what we need is, I think, what we need is a conversation, a nationwide conversation. And I think people are ready for this. If we're using plastics, some plastics are great, some plastics are good and very, very necessary and helpful. What are those plastics that we think are important? Let's open this debate out. Let's have a grown-up debate, and then we crack down on the ones that we decide collectively are rubbish.
Well, I feel like that's where we got to in your session, Fiona. So good to see that the debate has matured a little bit at least. And just finally to finish on, Edie Live this year is all about turning your ambitions into action. So I want to ask you both, if you have a kind of personal ambition around your job role, around the environmental movement, what's your kind of main one you want to focus on, and how are you going to turn that into action this year? Perhaps Fiona, we'll start with you.
So my personal one within work is actually to reach out to as many. I'm really passionate about the ripple effect that I can have sitting in an organisation. Not only the impact I have within the organisation, but also the changes I can make across all of its suppliers and all of its partners, and that would be massive in comparison to what I can do just within the organisation that I'm in. So my mission is to engage as many of the suppliers and many of the business partners that I can to make them really act now and set really strong targets, because I'm also really clear that what we're doing at Sky is not incremental change, because we're way past incremental change. We need to act now, both on climate and resource and plastics. And really make very strong targets. You might not even know how you're going to get there, like towards net zero, but it will enable you to innovate and the people within your business to think very differently about how they do business now and what they need to change.
Great stuff. And Lucy?
I've got so many ambitions, it's hard to pick one, but I do think that from my sector, from say the media, I still think that we've got a real problem with diversity, and there's such a specific idea of what an environmentalist looks like, or what an environmental correspondent looks like, which has only really been reinforced. Every senior environmental correspondent is a well-to-do guy, white guy of a certain age, and I really want to broaden the discussion. So I'm getting involved in something called the London Wildlife Festival in East London, which has been put together by a natural history presenter called David Lindo, and we're particularly reaching out to actual communities from East London and engaging people properly in ecology, frontline climate change, because people need to understand their own environment as well, and people are becoming really divorced from that environment. And one of the things that people love is a lot of people now enjoy making content themselves. So I want to help people to do that and articulate how they feel about these issues. That's my ambition.
Okay, great stuff. A really positive note to end on. Thank you both so much for your time today. Realise it's quite a manic show. There's a lot going on, so I appreciate you taking the time to come and sit to me on these rather garish looking chairs. But thank you.
I like them.
Yeah.